What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video in my Introduction to C++ series. Today we're going to be going over some techniques in C++ that are known as flow control. And the core idea of flow control, first off, what is the core idea? The core idea of flow control is that these are going to be things in your program that allow your program to make decisions. There are a lot of other ways to have your code make decisions in C++, but flow control is going to be the main way you do that. Now, the first technique in flow control that we are going to be going over is something known as an if statement. Now, what is the if statement? The if statement essentially says, okay, if it is sunny outside, I'm going to play basketball. If it is cold outside, I'm going to get ice cream, or something of that matter. The core idea is that you're saying if a condition is true, then you're going to do something. And the way that it looks in C++ is this. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to declare an integer variable called temperature. And we're going to set that to be 60. This is obviously going to represent 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Now we are going to write our first if statement. And we're going to say if temperature is greater than 60, we're going to do stdc out. It is relatively warm outside. Grab a jacket, please. Oh, since it's going to be warm, you don't need a jacket. So you don't need a jacket. Okay. And, greater than 50. Okay, then we're going to compile our program. We're going to compile our program. And then we're going to run it with, a.x. Now we could see that it prints for a terminal. It is relatively warm outside. You don't need a jacket. Now, why did it print this? It printed it because your compiler internally is going to look at this if statement and it's going to say, okay, this is an if statement right here. And we're going to check whatever condition is inside of this if statement. And if that condition is true, we are going to execute whatever code is inside of the if statement. Now, what if you want to do something like, okay, if it is sunny outside, we are going to go play basketball. However, if it is cold outside, then we are going to stay inside and watch a movie. That is going to lead into the next idea, which is known as an else if statement. And we can write it somewhat like this. Else if temperature is greater than 50, or else if temperature is less than 50, we could stdc out. It is too cold. Stay inside and watch a movie. And if we compile this program again, actually, before we compile, let's change the value of the temperature to 40, just to kind of see what happens. So we can compile this program again and run it with .a.x. And we could see that it prints out, it is too cold. Stay inside and watch a movie. Now, why did it print this? The compiler saw this if statement, and like I said before, it's going to check whether the condition inside of the if statement is true. So it sees that the value of temperature is 40 currently. However, the condition inside of the if statement is going to be false because temperature currently as it is not greater than 50. So this block of code is not going to execute. What it then does is it goes down the program and it says and it sees the else if statement. So it knows it has to evaluate another condition. And it's going to look inside of the else if statement and it's going to see temperature is less than 50. And it's going to check the value of temperature. And it's going to say, hey, the value of temperature currently is 40 and temperature is less than 50. So that means the else if statement is going to be true. So then whatever code is inside of this else if statement is going to execute. Now, a third and final concept that we're going to cover is something called the else statement. And the core high-level idea of the else statement is going to look like this. Okay, if it is sunny outside, we're going to play basketball. However, if it is cold outside, we're going to stay inside and watch a movie. If it is neither hot or cold, which is impossible, but we are going to travel to Mars. And that leads into our final idea of the else statement. The else statement, unlike the if and else if statements, do not have a condition to check. That is because the else statement can only be placed after the very end of if statements and else if statements. And let's say inside of the else statement we stdc out. This is impossible. Travel to Mars. Oh god. C and L. And let's change the value of temperature back to 50 degrees. Ooh. And let's compile our program. And let's run it. And you could see that it prints, this is impossible, travel to Mars. That's because the compiler looks at the if statement. It says it's relatively warm outside, you don't need a jacket. This is not going to execute because temperature equals 50, so this is going to be false. It's going to check temperature against 50 again, but this time checking if temperature is less than 50. This condition is going to be false, so it's not going to go here. Finally, after the very end of the chain of if and else if statements, it's going to see this else statement. And your compiler is going to execute this block of code, whatever is inside of the else statement, because none of the earlier if statements or else if statements had a condition that evaluated to true. The next flow control technique that we are going to be going over is called the for loop. Now, what is the for loop? First, let me delete this block of code. Let's say I want to print out stdc out. This is a very simplistic example, but I feel like it illustrates the idea very well. Let's say I want to print out number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. And I want to do that, let's say, up to number 20. If I do this 20 times, this is going to take forever to type out manually. But you could do it a little bit faster with something known as a for loop. And the syntax looks something a little like this. You're going to write for, and for now, we will do this. The first part of the for loop is something called initialization. You're going to declare a variable. Usually you declare as an int I, and typical convention says to initialize it to 0. And then the next part of the for loop is that you're going to write the stopping condition for the for loop. For how long does the for loop run until this condition is met? And for the purposes of this video, we are going to say I less than 20. The next part of the for loop is going to be I'm not exactly sure the words to describe it, but it's going to be um, how this initialized variable changes with each iteration of the for loop. And again, standard convention is to do I plus plus. Now, what does this for loop say? This says for an integer I starting at 0, for as long as it is less than 20, we're going to increment I by 1 for every iteration and then execute whatever block of code is in the for loop. And let's tie this back into our earlier example described earlier and do std cout number I std and out. And let's compile this program and run it. Let's make that cpp. And we could run it with a.x. Oh, shoot. And we could run it with a.x. And we could see that it does exactly what we were trying to do earlier. It std outed number 0, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, all the way up to number 19. This is so much faster than doing the std out number 1, out number 2, and doing that 20 times. So that is the basic idea of the for loop. Start recording. All right. The final flow control technique that we're going to be going over is something called the while loop. Now, what is the core idea of the while loop? Okay, let's say that I'm eating dinner, which I do most days. And I'm eating, and this meal is very delicious. So I could think of something like, while Jake is enjoying this really delicious meal, he is going to keep eating. That is the core idea. It's very similar to a for loop in that you're kind of saying, while this certain condition is true, do some block of code. And high level in C++ is going to look like this. While condition is true, while certain condition is true, you're going to execute whatever block of code is in here. Now let's tie learning how to write a for loop into the example done earlier for the for loop. And let's initialize a variable called x, and then we're going to set it equal to 0. Like before, we're going to want to do something like std out number 1, number 2, number 3, all the way up until std out number 20. Like before, doing all of this is going to be very time consuming. So we could use an idea of a while loop. And the way you could write the while loop looks like this. While x is less than 20, you could say std out number x std end out, and then you could increment x. Oh wait, x equals x plus plus. Oh, you could do x plus plus. And if we compile this program and run it, you could see just like the previous example, it's number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 19. And that is what we want. The while loop and for loop are two very powerful techniques in C++ that you could use to execute a certain block of code multiple times. Um, it is a very flexible and very diverse technique, and you could do a lot of things with the while loops and for loops. For example, you could put if statements in while loops for doing something like if x equals 10, SEDC out, the value of x is at my favorite number. And then you could still do your idea of SEDC out number x plus g plus main.cpp x, and you could still do this. You could do the value x is my favorite number, and then yeah, you could do a lot of things with it. It is entirely up to your imagination of how you structure your while loops, your for loops, your if statements, to create the best program that you could create. The final technique that I want to introduce is something known as a break statement. And what is that? Let's say that you are driving down the road and you start to go a little bit faster than you want to. Instead of hitting the normal brakes, which is obviously a normal way to stop the car, if you really need to stop immediately, you could hit the emergency brakes. This is a little bit more dangerous, but it is going to stop the car and be able to hopefully bring the car to a safe halt. That same idea works in C++ with your for loops and your while loops. Let's first look at the case with the for loop. Let's say we are iterating up to the number 100. And we're saying STDC out number high. But let's say the for loop reaches a number that we hate. For example, if I equals 45, let's say you really hate the number 45, you could write this singular word, break. And what this does is it says, okay, you are executing the for loop as usual. However, if I reaches a certain number, you are going to break. And this is going to force halt the program. Oops. And if we compile the program and run it, you could see that it does not go up to the number 100. It stops at the number 45 and breaks the for loop. If we delete the for loop and compile the program as usual, we could see that it runs up to 100 as usual. The same idea can be applied to while loops. So let's say we initialize a variable called x, which is equal to 0, and we can say while x is less than 100, you do SDC out number x, and you could say if x plus plus. And let's say you also really hate the number 78. If you could say if x equals 78, you could break. If we g plus main.cpp and run it, you could see once x reaches 78, this break statement executes, and your code stops. And just like before, if we delete this if statement and compile and run this code like usual, we could see that it executes to full completion like usual. So the break statement, it's hard to see the utility of the break statement right now because we're only running very simplistic programs. But as your projects and codes start to get more and more complex, a lot of times you're going to want to break your for loops or your while loops in very certain, very special conditions. And that is when the break statements are going to be useful. It force halts your while loop and your for loop. Once your compiler sees this break statement, it's going to immediately stop whatever is going on in your program. In this video, we covered the basic idea of if statements, else statements, for loops and while loops, how you could use them to control the flow within your program, to do certain blocks of code multiple times without having to manually write or copy and paste each single line of code. And we also briefly introduced the idea of break statements and how they can be used to emergency halt any programs that you have going on so that you could end your for loops and while loops early on in special conditions. We also went over basic uses of each of the concepts that we covered: if statements, else statements, for loops and while loops, and break statements. Because in computer science, it is one thing to know the concept, it is a completely different thing to be able to understand and implement the technique in an actual useful program of itself. And that's all I have for you guys in today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys learned more than something. I hope you guys learned a lot of things today. And I will see you guys in the next one.